Welcome back to another Bionicle review. As I've stated in the previous videos I've made recently, I am doing these currently because they are easy to put together on just my phone since my computer is destroyed. As I have also said in those videos, if you do want to help support Baneshake, you can actually donate to a fundraiser I've started for replacing my computer. The sooner I'm able to get a new computer, the sooner I'm able to go back to the more elaborate videos that I like to make for my channel. So anything you're willing to donate is greatly appreciated. But to the point at hand, today we are looking at the Bionicle Stars set Piraka, number 7137. This released for the winter 2010 wave, and at the time it cost $7.99 in the US. Bionicle Stars was something of a controversial line when it launched. It was the very last line of Bionicle sets that we wound up getting in the original timeline, which had run for 10 years at this point, but it was frankly very underwhelming for everyone who had grown up and loved the series. These sets were basically the small villager build that had been used 2 years prior for the Matoran in 2008 and the Agorai, who were basically just Matoran in 2009. But these were supposed to be these more heroic or more villainous, bigger, grander characters. Instead, though, they used a body type that was less posable and smaller, and therefore it was just at odds with what we were used to getting in the line. Additionally, being the last time that we ever got any of these, they decided they would make something of a greatest hits style lineup, wherein all 6 characters were these all-star characters. Except it didn't really work on that front either. I'll get into those details when we look at the cast on the back, but first let's look at the front here. Now, obviously, we have the main build, which is the Piraka himself. Some quotation marks apply. The name's not the most accurate. We also have this golden mask in the background and a piece of golden armor showcased on the front. Those both tie in, wherein one of the characters would get to wear a piece that came with all of the sets, and then he would be supercharged. It was basically a way to get kids to want to buy all of them. But that aside, we're also going to look at the top before we turn things around, because, in a nice touch, the molding on the canister has the labyrinth that led to all of the cosmic shenanigans of the final year and a half, really, of what was going on with Bionicle. Now, on the back, in addition to just showing the set being stored in the container, we have the other characters in the lineup, and I think this is the perfect time to just briefly talk about why Stars didn't really hit the way that LEGO wanted it to. Now, some of the characters really were good inclusions. In fact, the 2 old classic heroes are very nice to see. Tahu, who was the original mascot for Bionicle from the original year, makes a very similar reappearance. And Takanuva, from a couple of years later, the Toa of Light, is also a welcome addition. Now, sadly, his color was changed so that they could make gold the gimmick for the extra armor pieces, so he sort of gets knocked down to silver. That was a bit of a shame. Now, on the villain front, from the classical years, we had a Rakshi, also from the Mask of Lightwave, although this one came in a new color that hadn't been seen before in the sets, yellow, which was a brand new power set. We were aware of it from the lore, but it was nice to see it in toy form. And this one, Piraka, who is not actually one of the 6 Piraka from 2006, but one of their species, and in fact a character who had also existed in the lore, Neck-tahn. Now the last 2 were kind of disappointing, and the biggest problem. We have Gresh, who was released the year prior, but instead of having the bigger and better toy to work with, it was the shorter one like I mentioned, and the armor was less elaborate. I'll be completely honest, I can't even think of the villainous black Glatorian offhand, but like Gresh, these guys were just better the year prior. This was just a shorter, less elaborate toy that came the very year following the larger and more in-depth toy. All in all, it's a very strange way to end a decade-long toy line, but maybe there's going to be some winning. Obviously, when I decided to review one of these, I intentionally sought out this one since it seemed like one of the more interesting ones. The molding seems nice. It's a character that we knew about from the lore, so let's go ahead and open it up and take a look and see what we think. And so here we have the completed set put together with the extra golden armor piece as well. And the instructions, which unsurprisingly don't have anything too crazy or out there. There's obviously the lineup of the toys, the instructions themselves, but I did notice something building it here, which honestly makes me speculate a little bit. Here in the back is an advertisement for the Bin 10 lineup that LEGO very briefly did, which gives me a little bit of pause, because if there's anything that was worse reviewed than the Bionicle Stars lineup, it was the Bin 10 lineup of buildable action figures. So that really makes me wonder, did Bionicle somehow get shortchanged a little bit of their budget so that the action figures line could go in? Or maybe if it wasn't budgetary, was it just so that they could get more attention on it? It's just speculation, I can't say it one way or the other. Just something interesting that I was wondering while looking at this. Additionally, there was also some LEGO Club stuff from the back. You can tell this is old enough that you're still seeing Exoforce characters and Mars Mission popping up in the art, so that was a nice little nostalgia blast for someone who remembered growing up and seeing sets like those. But as far as Piraka himself, which again is not an accurate word, this character is actually someone called Neck-tahn. He was one of the Skokti, the race that the Piraka came from, but he was this brutal warlord who decided to join with the villains for the final battle. Now, okay, first of all, I just realized I did the arm and the leg mixed up, so let me fix that. Alright, take two. That's what I get for trying to do a review like this after I get home from a long day at work. Anyway, now that I have shamed myself for you all to see, here is the correct build for Bionicle Stars Piraka. I was saying something about how Neck-tahn was the name of this guy. Anyway, the word Piraka that they use for the marketing made sense for some of the kids to follow who might not have been as in-depth in the lore, because he does look like the Piraka sets from 2006. Basically, though, those 6 were these characters who decided to form a team so that they could go and steal the Mask of Life. The word Piraka means thief and murderer in the Matoran language. It's also apparently kind of vulgar. Apparently, if you called someone Piraka, it could just start long-standing generational feuds, that kind of thing. So the point is, these guys that he is named after are clearly bad dudes. The actual species name for them is Skokti, and so they have these heat blasts, which you can see in the fact that it gave him orange eyes. Bizarrely, his organic face, which is his face and not a mask, also has a different face underneath it due to the type of head that they use. So he has 2 faces going on. It's a little strange. Also a little strange, the way that this has to be built in order for the spine to attach leaves just very empty, open, hollow space on the front of his very thin body. And I think that just looks a little odd. But thankfully, it's not too distracting, and all in all, the character does look good using the pieces it does. I think it would have been nice if they'd found some way to tie in the armor piece, maybe if it were him wearing it or something until Tahu gets it back. That might give it a little bit more detail. But they didn't go that route. Another thing that I do have to complain about with these being as small as they are is that they're all just out of character. They don't work as well with the sets that were not in the Stars lineup. So Neck-tahn is supposed to be a big, dominating force. He was described as very large by Greg Farshtey when he was writing about his stuff originally. Except here are the Piraka, or one of the Piraka, that actually came out a few years before. And why, yes, he does not fit in the same frame as our tiny little Neck-tahn here. Thok has to be crouched down just to get him around the same height as the character who's supposed to be much more massive. So, if I absolutely had to go back in time and give this one a score, which is not something I even tend to do in the other Bionicle reviews I've done, but if I had to go back and score this one, at the time, I'd say this would probably be about a 6 out of 10. The new headpiece is nice. The usage of the weaponry that makes up his sword, even though it was pre-existing, is nice. But there were just so many baffling things that they did in creating this set. Now, 10 years down the road, after the fact, knowing a little bit more about how the line would attempt to go on and that kind of thing, I'd probably be a little more generous nowadays. This one I'd probably bump that up to about a 7, just because it was a new character rather than just rehashing a different character. And it was one that, though imperfect, clearly could be worked around with to make something interesting. I could see someone expanding on this, giving it a bigger body and working from there, and having something really cool on their hands. So, this is Piraka.